Imperium of Man and Heretics, welcome to a brand new lore video. It's been a fat minute since we've dived straight into the Warhammer 40K universe, and today we are doing that. As you know, I will consume all lore, and Warhammer 40K is the very rare exclusive S-tier lore. It is up there in S-tier for some of the greatest lore ever written, and it is getting officially, by the way, it is officially getting a TV show. I literally just predicted that the next big TV show, like, since Game of Thrones, the next TV show that will actually have a chokehold on the public zeitgeist, I said it was going to be Warhammer. I was, in fact, well, I don't know if it's going to have a chokehold on the zeitgeist yet. We're not there yet. But I am literally going to be right, okay? I will be right, all right? I'm telling you, it's true. It's true. It will be the next thing. It is official. It has been announced. Henry Cavill is working on an official Warhammer show with Amazon Prime. In fact, they already just, for their secret level show, they already released this, and it looks insanely good. Like, dude, yes, yes, oh yes, all the yes. Bro! Anyway, it's freaking awesome. I already reacted to this. I'm not going to show it to you again. But the point that I'm trying to make here is I've said that this is going to have a chokehold in the public zeitgeist because I love Warhammer 40K. Today we are looking into every single faction of Warhammer 40K from the perspective of orcs. Now, orcs are one of the goats of Warhammer 40K lore. If you think that they're just like orcs from Lord of the Rings or whatever, you are solely mistaken. The orcs in 40K are awesome. They're amazing, and I love them immensely. They're hilarious and dope. So we're diving into the lore of every single faction, but from the perspective of the orcs. It's a really interesting idea. We'll get some orc lore. We also get some lore to all the insight into all the factions, like, I guess, the Eldar and the Necrons and the Imperium of Man and all that shit. If you want to see more lore dives into Warhammer 40K, I have literally already done, like, probably 10 plus lore dives into Warhammer, but here we go, baby!
According to recent polling data that I just made up, there isn't a single 40K fan in existence that doesn't love the orcs.
Facts, 100% facts, unadulterated truth, and facts. Thank you, Wes Hammer, very cool.
If they say they don't, they're either lying or they hate fun. And
no, it's not that they're lying or hate fun.
And if
no, then they're fake fans, all right? I literally just made a video. So some guy on YouTube, Adam something, just made this video. It's like a 25-minute video basically saying any Warhammer 40K fan is like a Nazi and a fascist and shit like that. And, no! First of all, he already made a video debunking all that shit, but he just got half the lore wrong. I feel like the Warhammer 40K fans that don't like orcs are just not Warhammer 40K fans. Alright, I'm consuming the lore, I'm gonna start reading the books, I am literally here.
That's you. Who hurt you? Now, part of the charm of 40K as a franchise is how bleak, dark, and comically serious it often takes itself. But right when it's all starting to feel a little too depressing, orcs come in like a giant green wrecking ball, ready to inject some much-needed humor into the grimdark future.
See, but the thing I like so much about that is because it does... Which book are you starting with? I'm doing the Horus Heresy. I'm gonna start with the Horus Heresy. But, I think Horus Rising is the first one that I was gonna pick up. But anyway, the reason why, I mentioned the orcs as, like, fascinating characters, it's because it goes to show how different ideologies warp, warp the perspective of a lot of the people in the world. Like, as it is right now, with, let's say, the Imperium of Man, if the Imperium is obviously an incredibly serious mind fuck of a government. Like, everything is threatening to kill them. There are so many ways humanity could just literally end tomorrow. So they actually actively need to move forward and dispatch of any possible enemy. So you could be confused that it's a fascist regime because of how they're wiping out dirty heretics and xenos. But you're wrong. It's not fascism when it's actively doing this not for the sake of bigotry, but for the sake of actual humanity. For the sake of humanity's survival. So, orcs have a different perspective. They're not so much about survival. They just fucking love what they're doing. They're much more, I guess, anarchist, less politically driven, a lot more just like, yeah, fuck yeah, I like a good war, I like a good battle, more money, more battle, more bullets. And what you see how a much more, I guess, primitive or primeval perspective warps their philosophies, and it's just so interesting. It is so interesting. God, every single one of these characters, every single faction is just such an interesting psychology behind it. And I really think if Warhammer 40K gets like a Game of Thrones treatment, it will unironically be like the next goated series in pop culture.
It's not to love about these guys. They're a bunch of cockney football hooligans that don't care about taking territory. And
as you can tell by their teeth, they're British.
Not trying to build some grand empire.
Nope.
They don't even have an agenda to put.
That's the beauty. That is so the beauty. It's like, dude, the Chaos Gods versus the Imperium of Man, like, that shit is all about, you know, it's authoritarianism, it's anarchy, it's chaos versus order. Like, you have so many different ideologies that are constantly clashing. The Orcs are probably the only group without some sort of major ideology that they're trying to push. They're just like, if we die glorious.
The only thing the Orcs care about is fighting, and in their pursuit of getting into ever more crazy scraps, they've spread to every corner of the galaxy in order to give all of them.
I love them. There's just billions of them.
Other factions a quote proper kicking. But what do the Orcs think of all those other factions?
All right.
Do they think they're a bunch of weaklings and cowards, or do they have a lot of admiration for groups that can hold their own in a fight?
All right, so I'm guessing that they do have admiration for the Imperium in some degree. The fact that the Imperium has literally changed their perspective in such a massive degree over the course of thousands of years to literally become warmongers, I do think that they must have some sort of respect for the Space Marines and like fighting them. They have to, right? I feel like they have to. Who do they hate? I'm sure they hate the fucking, the Eldar. I'm sure they hate the Eldar. Those guys are just vindictive motherfuckers.
Do they look at a species like, say, the Tau, who specialize in ranged warfare as a bunch of cowards, or do they appreciate their taste in Daka? What are their thoughts on...
Daka is bullets, for those of you unaware, all right? Do you know why Daka is bullets in Orc language? Because when you push the trigger of a machine gun, it goes... Daka, 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 Daka. Let's go! By the way, the guy that made the videos calling all Warhammer fans fascist, you know what his favorite faction is? I'm not even kidding. Dude, I have to show this to you. This is like my favorite random thing of all time. You have to see this. You have to see this. Yeah, so I already covered this guy on Nuxanor, in case you were unaware. I already covered it on Nuxanor. Bro, you're not gonna believe this. He's a Tau player, bro. There's no way. There's no way. There just ain't no way, dude. That's just not right, bro. That's crazy. I wonder what his dislike ratio is. Yeah! That's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Factions like the Necrons, the Eldar, the Tyranids, Chaos, or the Imperium. Which ones do they like fighting against the most? And
so I think they hate Tzeentch. I think that they think that the followers of Tzeentch are awful, but they probably love the followers of Khorne. Like, Tzeentch is the god of, like, you know, weird fucking decisions and convoluted plans, and Khorne is like bloodshed and carnage.
Dare I say it? Have any of them...
Of course he plays the communist fish people. Yes, he does. The Tower communist fish people.
Actually managed to earn the Orcs' respect? What about some of the gods in this universe, like Khorne or the Emperor? Do they respect them as avatars of war?
He fully went with the God Emperor theory.
Or think they're a bunch of wimps waiting to get pasted by Gork and Mork?
Mork! Okay, the gods of the Orcs are Gork and Mork, and they're just fucking overpowered as shit.
I get into all that and a whole lot more in this video, as I had nothing to do but research this one for the last week after catching COVID at a Magic the Gathering event, which I know is an obvious thing to say now that I'm saying it out loud. It's like saying I caught the plague when I visited Nurgle's garden. It's like, what was I thinking? Sorry if I sound a little bit off in this one. I'm still kind of getting over it. But anyways, before we dive headfirst into the grimdark, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor.
Nice.
This video is participating in the My favorite thing about deal with this or start for free. Warhammer 40K can get pretty dark.
All right.
The Milky Way galaxy,
I love how dark and gritty it is. It's so fucking good.
Of the 41st millennium is one where hatred and loathing have been allowed to fester and spread unchecked through the minds and hearts of nearly every spacefaring species. When we try to measure how they all feel about each other, it's ultimately an exercise in splitting hairs over who they each hate the most.
Yeah!
But right at the moment we're about to give up hope that anybody could be having a good time in the grimdark future, we're introduced to everyone's favorite boys, the Orcs.
Yeah.
A bunch of fighting...
Yeah, because honestly, the grimdark future of 40K, I think that the setting is awesome. Like, it is, I think, the peak sci-fi universe setting of all time. Like, I've covered lore in a lot of different one of these settings. I will consume all lore, okay? And I've looked at a lot of fucking sci-fi lore, all right? We looked at Dune, all right? I read the Foundation books. Like I'm telling you, we did Star Wars lore. Like we saw a lot of sci-fi shit. Bro, there is nothing that hits home as like the grimdark of Warhammer 40K.
Obsessed Cockney hooligans who ran.
And it only takes someone with like the cognitive abilities of the orcs. Dumbasses. Right? It only takes someone like the orcs to actually enjoy the world and enjoy what's going on, because it's such an insanely dark, tragic timeline where everyone is literally a moment away from annihilation. The only people that can actually have a good time are the fucking orcs. And that one Necron guy that I fucking love so much.
Across the galaxy looking for a good scrap to get stuck in. If you know
they're even pirate orcs, they're so good.
Anything about 40K, I
already did a whole orc lore dive.
Need to tell you just how amazing and hilarious they are, even if the people in universe absolutely hate them.
Dude, everyone hates them. Everyone hates them, bro.
They're like a hurricane of violence that carves a bloody path across the stars and kills anyone that gets in their way. But from our perspective, they seem to have a pretty good sense of humor about the whole thing. And their passion for fighting is pretty damn infectious.
Yeah.
The funny thing about orcs is that all of the fighting they do isn't motivated by hatred for their enemies.
They're the goats, all right? They are the least problematic people in Warhammer 40K, all right? You hear that? Whoever wrote racism in Wicked, right? You saw all these people complaining about how in Wicked, it's like anti-green racism is like a real thing, bro. The orcs are the least racist people of all time. They're just goats. They just want to kill everyone.
Like most other species. In fact, hate is kind of a foreign emotion to the orcs.
True!
They have no concept of what it's like to hate something.
Dude, isn't that like a hilarious little gimmick?
Now sure, there's things they don't like much or maybe find annoying, but they have a simple and elegant solution for that.
Violence!
They just fight those things.
Yeah! Violence isn't the question. Violence is the answer.
Which is what they love to do, and thus what they assume everybody else in the universe loves as well.
God, I love that so much, because most people, I think this is just really true psychology in regards to everyone. Most people think that other people think the same way as them. I think with voting, for example, you see a lot of people like Anna Kasparian. Like she's a left-wing person, and she became friends with someone, and then it turns out that person was like a Trump voter, and she was so shocked. What? A friend with someone that was a Trump voter? But you're not a racist, bigot, fascist, Nazi. And it literally shook her to her core. I think most people view other people as like them. And these guys, they just think everyone's like them too. It's like, I love violence. They probably also love violence. I mean, they are fighting, so hell yeah, let's go.
And speaking of fighting, it's pretty much the only thing that the orcs care about. You gotta remember that they were created 60 million years ago by the old ones as living weapons to fight against the Necrons.
Yeah, they are way older than humanity.
Every single aspect of them, all the way down to their genetics, was designed for combat. Fighting isn't just something they enjoy, it's everything to them.
That's what they live for.
It is a biological need, in much the same way that food or drink is for us.
Violence isn't the answer. Violence is the question. Yes is the answer. Thank you, Chet.
Because of this, the lens that the orcs view their galactic neighbors through is almost always framed by how good of a scrap they can give the boys.
Yeah.
Now, what the orcs actually think about all of the other species they routinely go up against is admittedly one of those topics that isn't nearly as fleshed out as it could be. Insight into orc philosophy.
The crazy thing is, like, there are 400 novels in the Warhammer universe.
Philosophy used to be pretty rare until we started getting all of the Mike Brooks orc novels that were written from their perspective.
What? Where there's a warp, there's a way! Ah, no! The Big Daka, brutal cunning. There's no way, bro. There is a whole series of books from the perspective of the orcs. That's crazy. I have to see this shit. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So for those of you that are unaware, all right, this is the list of Warhammer 40K novels. So I wanted to start with Horus Rising. So this is the Horus Heresy, all right? So so this is 50 books, 54 books, that leads up to the Siege, all right? Then you got another 10 books, which is the Siege, all right? So that's 65 books that is literally just the prologue. Now, these are other books that happened in that time period, all right? Then there are other novellas about this many, all right? Then you got the Beast Arises series and the Adeptus Sororitas series. And you got some short series, and then you got these 3 books about the Adeptus Mechanicus, and you got these about the Adeptus Titanicus, and then these about the Alpha Legion, these about the Astra Militarum, and the Bastion Wars and the Black Templars. We're still in B, by the way, in alphabetical order, in case you were curious. These are all different books, bro. These are all separate books. All of these. Like, this is a 400-page book, okay? I want you to be aware of how many books there are. Space Marines, Tau Empire. Okay, so here are the orcs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 novels from the perspective of the orcs. No. Claw of Mork. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So Brutal Cunning, War Boss, and Big Daka, as well as a bunch of short stories and
Dude, honestly, I'm telling you, Warhammer 40K, if it's done right, it will literally take over the fucking ecosystem. The pop culture ecosystem.
the Orc codexes are going to serve as the primary sources for all of the information in this video.
All right, let's go. So this is actual insight into the philosophical perspective of the orcs.
And because this script was made using sources almost exclusively written from their perspective, I'm gonna do honor to the orcs and use all of their preferred names for different factions.
Nice.
I'll explain them as we go, but real quick, humans are known as humies. Space Marines are all scrawnies or pansies in the
Dude, that's fucking awesome.
older lore, and their Dark Eldar variant is known as the Spikies. Tau are fish heads or fish boys.
Based.
Tyranids are bug eyes. Necrons, and pretty much all robots for that matter, are known as tin heads, tin boys, the tins, or the tinnies.
This is fucking hilarious, dude. The orcs just call them all by slurs. It's like, I don't need to know your name, Tinny. Oh, no.
Chaos Space Marines are the chaos lads with the spikes, and my personal favorite, demons are known as, quote, chaos griblies.
Chaos Gribblies!
We're going to kick things off with their
Bro.
thoughts on humies, as by far there's more information about their feelings on them than any other faction.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, we are looking at most of the story of 40K from humans' perspective.
And by examining how they view our species, we get a good framework of Orky values that we can use to understand their relationship with Chaos and other Xenos.
All right.
You may be surprised to hear this, but the orcs are not
The strategy. Shoot more, sometimes hit. Oi! Listen, accuracy doesn't need to be better. You just need to shoot more bullets.
particularly renowned for being especially deep thinkers. A fun fact, one of the things that starts to happen to them as they grow bigger from surviving a ton of battles is that their brains start growing as well, and also start thinking a whole bunch more,
Yo.
which is something that the orcs find particularly annoying. Since the
True. What thoughts do you really need in your head, bro, aside from kill and fight?
vast majority of them will get killed before they ever reach what we would consider smart, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they don't really take the time to observe all of the different nuances between Humie factions. The Sisters of Battle, the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Navy, it doesn't matter. They're all just Humies to the orcs.
Understandable.
This extends to
Dude, the orcs are like, they reached a level of equality. They reached a level of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we all strive to reach. They are the true DEI consultant firms.
even factions that we as the audience would consider so radically different that they're almost a different species entirely, like the cyborg tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or even the friggin' Gene Stealer cults. The former is just the Humie equivalent of mech boys to the orcs, and the
Yeah.
latter is a bunch of funny looking Humies with too many arms.
Dude, that's hilarious, bro. Oh my god, they're like, they look completely different to us, but to them, they don't see race. Guys, they don't see race.
There is, of course, one major exception to this rule, and that's the Space Marines, or the beakies as the orcs call them, due to the fact that the Mark VI Corvus pattern power armor looks kinda like a bird. The other most common variant of Space Marine armor has a faceplate that the orcs think looks like an orc when he's straining too hard at the drops.
Dude, Space Marine armor, dog. They think Space Marine armor is modeled after their face when they're taking a shit. It's like, oh, look at that.
Which is their word for a latrine.
No,
now that obviously
bro.
doesn't make for a good nickname, so no matter what armor they're in,
Like, yeah, they weren't gonna call them the poopies. I guess beakies works.
all Space Marines are beakies. But we'll get into their thoughts on Space Marines later in this
Dude,
video.
they gotta love the Space Marines. Those guys are literal machine gods created to kill.
In multiple scenes throughout the Orc novels by Mike Brooks, and many codexes and campaign supplements from the last few decades, we get some direct quotes from the Orcs that give us a lot more insight into their views here. From their perspective, Humies are kind of weird. They're fun to fight for
Alright.
reasons that we'll get into shortly, but culturally, they just do a lot of things that don't make any sense.
Yeah, the orcs, they can't even fathom why people do what they do. It's so far away from their current, like, perspective on life. They can't even get it.
Like, for example, one of the Orcs' favorite pastimes other than fighting is looting. And when they end up stealing a Humie vehicle, their excitement of getting their hands on some new wheels is almost always soured by what they find inside.
All right.
You see, Humies have this really annoying habit of putting all of their flashy buttons and lights on the inside of their vehicles.
True! True!
Which, as every good orc knows,
That's ridiculous.
flashy gubbins are meant to go on the outside.
Yeah! Hello! I love them so much!
To show off to all the other boys.
Yeah, you have to show all the other orcs how cool your shit is.
At least Humie vehicles normally have a good old-fashioned set of wheels or tracks that they ride around on, which is something that the orcs respect. But unfortunately, this isn't always the case. When they fight against the Admech, for example, or the Red Robes as they call them, their tanks float around like the vehicles of the Scrawnies, the Fishheads, the Tin Boys, and the Spiky. Now, some orcs believe that
No wheels, cringe!
this is why the Red Robes are so soft. If your ride isn't constantly being bombarded with bumps and shocks strong enough to compress your spine, you'll never be proper hard.
Dude, they're spitting! They're spitting! This is like my cousin telling me, it's like, if you ain't riding stick shift, you're not driving a real car. It's like, all right, dude, whatever you say, man. If you don't feel the bumps of the road, you're gonna come out a pussy on the other side.
Another thing that perplexes them about Humies and their trucks is that they all tend to drive on these big lines in the dirt called roads or bridges or some other stupid Humie word.
That's
They don't understand why they don't just drive wherever they want.
Yeah,
and
fucking idiots. Look at them. They all believe in order and authoritarianism. Look at them. Slaves to their culture on driving where society wants you to drive. Bro, losers.
do. Likewise, they have this hilariously weird habit of putting wheels on the doors inside of their ships and gargants, which, as every orc knows, you can't drive a door.
The bolts to open the doors. Why would they put wheels on doors? You can't drive doors.
But Humies just ain't logical.
True.
Humies also have this weird invention called an alarm system that's only purpose seems to be to get all of the Humies all riled up and scared before a fight.
Why would you need an alarm system? Why scare yourself for a fight? Dude, it's crazy.
Why they would invent something like this is completely beyond them. Every self-respecting orc knows that before you get stuck in, you and the lads have to amp yourself up with some hooting, hollering, and a nice loud wah at the top of your lungs.
They're right.
Not purposely induce feelings of fear and dread into all of your mates. Why they-
He's spitting, man. The orc guy is spitting. I gotta say, he's so right. He's so real for that. Why be scared and afraid when you could fight and go to Valhalla like a man?
They would make something like this, let alone put it on all of their buildings that contain all of their best loot, is something that continues to vex the orcs to this day.
Yeah, why would you just stress out over a good scrap, bro?
Humies also love wasting time building things that don't seem to have any practical application, like
what?
libraries.
Bro, you're not gonna beat me up with a library!
Schools, hospitals, or even cathedrals.
Hospitals!
To some
Okay, cathedrals, I mean, listen, I get their point a little bit, right? But like hospitals, bro?
bloke named the God Emperor.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Beings of logic like the orcs would never build anything that wasn't specifically going to be used in a fight.
Dude, that's so awesome, though. Like, I respect that so much. Their goal is fighting and battle. So anything that's not fighting and battle is like just a waste of time. You're gonna spend thousands of man-hours building a library to hold books?
Weapons, armor.
What does the shit in those pages have anything to do with the fact that I can literally murder you right now? El Bozo.
And even some of the weird mech boy inventions all had a purpose.
True.
But with Humies, 90% of what they made was practically worthless.
That's true.
At least when it came to their buildings, the Humies knew to make them real big. That was something that the orcs respected. It made it more fun to knock them over.
Yeah! This is awesome. Orcs looking at a brothel, flabbergasted. I don't understand!
Now, although Humie cathedrals are a bit much for the orcs, all of the statues depicting the Emperor is something that they can at least wrap their minds around.
Dude, I miss the Emperor. When is my goat coming back?
Although they've never seen
He honestly is such a cool figure in the lore. For the most like god adjacent characters in fantasy or science fiction lore are kind of cringe. The Emperor is just so fascinating. You always have to wonder how much of it was part of his plan. Who was he in history? Why did he do it the way he did? Like, what a fantastic fucking character.
seen him, considering that he's normally depicted as being 100 feet tall with a giant flaming sword. He's clearly either the boss of all the Humies or their god. Either way, it would make sense to them that he told all of the smaller Humies to build all these things, and they have to listen to him because, again, he's the boss. Now don't get it twisted, the god of the Humies in no way, shape, or form could stand up to true and proper gods like Gork and Mork.
True! By the way, for those of you that don't know about Gork and Mork, the gods of the orcs, one of them is brutally cunning and the other one is cunningly brutal.
But so far as they can tell, if they ever manage to make it all the way to Terra and break into the Golden Throne, they're gonna get to fight a 100-foot tall Humie. So that's something that all of the orcs are looking forward to.
Oh my god, the number one goal of the orcs is literally fighting the God Emperor, because if you lost, at least you lost to a 100-foot tall guy with a flaming sword. Oh! That's awesome.
Too. Now, it makes sense to the orcs that the Emperor is in charge, because based on all of the artwork they've seen, he's the biggest. This is how the orcs do things. The biggest orc is the boss.
Right.
Not just because he's
done with this stupid voting shit. All right, could democracy literally just disappear? Go away, democracy. The biggest person should become president of the United States. I just think that's how it works. Huge W, orcs. Enough with this divisiveness. You see people on the right and people on the left, they're always fighting and flinging poo at each other and arguing about inconsequential things, when in reality, if we would just make the biggest person president every single time, we would have no issues. Like, literally.
Stronger than all of the other boys, but because orcs get bigger the more fights they get in. So a proper big orc has a whole bunch of experience and thus makes for a better leader.
Honestly, that's fucking hilarious. Like, there's an actual, like, philosophical reason why the biggest guy should become the leader too.
But aside from the Emperor and the beakies, all of the other Humies are the same size, so they're always arguing with each other about who's in charge. This is something the boys just don't really understand.
Dude, they just don't understand. Like, why would they argue about who's in charge? Just make the biggest guy in charge.
And thus Humie hierarchy of command is still an enigma to them. What they think they should do is just fight it all out and figure out who's the biggest and strongest and make them the boss. But you gotta remember that Humies just ain't logical. They do things that don't make sense, and oftentimes it's better just not to think about it. Also, in their defense, Humies are pink or brown, fragile and soft, not tough and green like the boys.
True!
And Thak pointed out in Brutal Cunning, they die a lot easier as well.
No, stop talking about my Humies like that, bro. Oh my god. Dude, Humies, they just die so easily. They're just fleshy and pink and brown and they just squish.
If all of the Humies started fighting each other, they'd all just be dead, and then there would be no Humies for the orcs to crump.
True! True!
They're too weak for that kind of thing. And since they clearly want to keep fighting the orcs, they assume
they
that—
literally don't, by the way. They literally do not want to keep fighting the orcs. The humans would be so fucking happy if the orcs would just leave them alone. But though, every time the orcs fight, they fight back, which means they must be enjoying it. You're welcome, Humies.
The Humies have had to make a few sacrifices in this department for the greater good of fighting. Now, Humies have a lot of faults, don't get it twisted. They do a lot of weird stuff that just doesn't make any sense, and they waste an enormous amount of time not fighting when they could spend time fighting.
True!
But even after all that, the orcs absolutely love them.
Yeah, I knew that would be the conclusion. Because the Imperium of Man, they're fighting to survive, so they're fighting their hardest, and people are literally putting their all into it.
Even if they would never admit it out loud or even understand their—
Like, the humans, they don't like fighting. But every time they fight them, they will literally do their goddamn best to fight, so they must love it.
Affinity for them. And that's for two major reasons. One, even though they're not as good at fighting as the orcs, there's a lot of Humies. Now, we as the audience know that the orcs outnumber the Humies some 1,000 to 1, since they reproduce—
Yeah, they're an insane amount of orcs. But the orcs are so disjointed. They're so not connected. Unlike the humans, which are, for the most part, all under the Imperium of Man's big flag, the orcs are completely divided.
So quickly.
If the orcs all actually came together to work together, they could swarm and take over the galaxy.
But the orcs don't know this. From their perspective, it looks like Humies are everywhere.
Yeah, they're always outnumbered.
They can be found in every corner of the galaxy, and no matter how much time they spend fighting them, there's always more Humies. Every time you kill one, 10 more show up to take their place. And honestly, you couldn't ask for a better trait to have in an enemy. And two, although admittedly inferior to orc technology, the tech that Humies make is easily a close second, especially when compared to the strange, esoteric machines utilized by other xenospecies.
Yeah, they don't want to see some space elf magic, okay? They want to see a big machine gun shoot big projectiles, okay?
Humi weapons and armor are powerful.
They just make sense.
Efficient, reliable, and most importantly, they look like what they're supposed to be. A gun looks like a gun. A sword looks like a sword.
Yeah.
A tank looks like a tank.
Yeah.
Now, compare that to all of the stuff used by the spikies and the scrawnies. Their weapons are dainty little things that no self-respecting orc would ever be caught dead wielding. Now, the only real issue that orcs have with Humi gear is that, quite frankly, it's boring. Humis are always unoriginal, and
they just use boring old things. Swords to cut shit, guns to shoot shit.
Species, they fundamentally lack creativity. Their mech boys just don't have the pizzazz or flair of an orc mech boy. And this leads to all of their equipment.
Because like humanity is all about like complete utilitarianism at this point. The Imperium of Man is like utterly 100% utilitarianist majesty. That's what it's all about. I want the fucking most deadly thing possible, and we will homogenize it. If there's one weapon that's just better than all the other weapons, they will all use that one weapon. Unless they're the foot soldiers, in which case, get fucked, flashlight boys. But, they're all just gray. They're not necessarily cool and pizzazz. The orc guys, they have these insane looking fucking shit. And it's not useful, but it's so, like, I guess in their mind, so cool.
Looking exactly the same, meaning that none of them can ever tell whose stuff belongs to who. If you were to throw a whole bunch—
Because it's mass-produced weapons for the sake of, like, just for the sake of practicality. And the orcs are just, like, big pointy thing that also explodes. This is my battle axe.
Of orc guns into a pile, each of them would be able to tell immediately which one was theirs, or at least which one they liked better. And then they could probably bash the true owner's teeth in and take it for themselves.
Yeah.
Now don't get me wrong, this isn't a deal breaker for the orcs when it comes to measuring up whether a species is a good enemy or not. In fact, Humi gear is their favorite thing to loot aside from looting gear from other orcs. Humi gear is like a blank canvas that the orcs can work their magic on and make it proper orc.
Yes, they can paint it red to make it move faster.
This normally takes the form of just gluing and welding a whole bunch of extra metal and scrap.
They just literally, oh, it's my double tank. What do you mean your double tank? I took one tank and I glued it to the top of another tank. Now it's a double tank.
To them to make them extra killy.
Yes.
For example, beaky power claws work pretty good. They're just unoriginal. They look like a big Humi hand and don't have, big metal claws on them like a proper power claw. But that's nothing that can't be fixed.
Oh my fucking god, look at this shit.
With a bit of orky ingenuity.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into what everybody actually cares about.
All right.
What do the orcs think of fighting against the Humis? How do they measure up when compared to every other species?
All right.
Do the orcs love it or find them annoying? Are they the orcs' preferred enemy, or does that esteemed title go to a different faction? Honestly, fighting Humis is kind of a mixed bag for the orcs. They have some qualities that make them a great proper enemy, while other things, not so much.
Right.
One-on-one, a Humi doesn't even come close to an orc. They're short, squishy, soft.
Well, I guess unless we're talking about the beakies. Is he gonna get to the beakies? No, I don't know if he's gonna mention this specifically, but I feel like an orc, like one of those big fucking orcs versus a space marine, dude, that's gotta be heaven.
And most of them are cowards, with of course the exception of old Baelai and the beakies. They're proper hard.
Yeah.
Humis are also just not
I don't know old Baelai.
really built for fighting. The orc's head is centered down low between their shoulders in the middle of their chest where they can keep it safe.
Dude, look how much insane information there is in Warhammer. Look how much lore there is. God! Sorry, I gotta keep diving.
But the Humis have their head on top of their shoulders, just waiting for it to get knocked off.
Humans are literally built to be murdered. Their heads are literally in the easiest spot to hit. Why the fuck would humans be born with heads on top of their shoulders?
That's why Humi
What the fuck is that fleshy thing? You call it a neck? What? Why do you need that?
Dreadnoughts, Knights, and Titans look more like an orc than a Humi. If they were built like a Humi with their head on top of their shoulders, they would probably just wander around the battlefield all stupid-like until they got knocked over and killed. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Humi tech is not as good as orc tech. But the orcs will be the first to tell you that it's pretty damn efficient. It's good at killing, and at least most of their guns actually sound like proper Daka. Not that pew-pew stuff that the fish heads, the tinnies, and the scrawnies use.
Get out of me. Miss me with that shit.
Or the gross squishy things that the bug eyes fight with that aren't even actually weapons. Also, Humis almost always understand proper fighting etiquette.
You fight until the fight is over and you kill everyone?
A rarity in the grimdark.
Fighting etiquette. You fight until the fight ends.
Future. they tend to show up to the fight with a whole lot of boys for the orcs to
Yeah!
fight. This is a kindness and a showing of respect
Let's
that
go.
is not lost on the orcs.
Yeah, true. The reason why they send all their military out against the orcs is because of respect, not because they're just, you know, trying to survive.
It's real neighborly of them, and the lads appreciate it.
Dude, it's so awful. Like, you can't reason with them. Like, could you imagine? Look, we're looking at this from the orcs' perspective, but look at this from the humans' perspective for just a second. Imagine needing to deal with this as your neighbors. There are untold trillions of orcs in the galaxy that think this way. Like, do you imagine how annoying that is? Bro, humans are literally just trying to survive till tomorrow, and the orcs are like, yeah, baby.
Even if the orcs don't really differentiate much between all of the different Humi clans, they can at least recognize that certain groups of Humis utilize different tactics, strategies, and war machines, and that's something that the orcs appreciate. Every orc will tell you that variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life, baby.
When it comes to fighting. And the Humis, to their credit, do a pretty good job of always keeping things interesting. With them, you never really know what you're gonna get.
Dude, these poor guys. Damn. Ain't no way he has a cross. That was outlawed in Warhammer.
Even if some cowardly groups of Humis like to use long-range artillery to paste all the boys before the fighting even really gets started. That, admittedly, is something they find annoying. But even still, they recognize that this is only one Humi tactic, and having a whole lot of different ways to conduct a fight is an important trait when measuring if someone's a good enemy or not.
All right, so that's the Humis. Ultimately, it's fascinating, I think, to look at it from the human perspective with all this in mind. From the orcs' perspective, fighting humans is just exactly what they want to do. The humans are literally fighting for their lives against an existential threat because the orcs think they like it as much as they do. How insane is that?
What about the Necrons, or the Tin Boys as the orcs?
The Necrons are probably, by the way, my favorite faction in Warhammer. Probably. Aside from maybe specific instances of humans. Oh, dude, and also the Tzeentch guys are fucking awesome. But yeah, I love the Necrons.
Call them. Are they as good of an enemy as the Humis? Well, they're certainly a lot tougher than Humis.
They're fucking immortal skeleton machines.
Most of them can take a hit without even flinching.
They also have these, like, antimatter weapons. Like, bro, there's no way the orcs like the Necrons. And that has to, even in their perspective, it has to be a not fair fight.
And the best part about the Tinnies is that when you're done killing all of them, they'll use their reanimation protocols, stitch themselves back together, and stand back up.
That's the best part! The best part is that they're immortal and you can kill them so many times. The battle never ends! Let's go!
Then the boys can kill them all over again.
Yeah!
Any orc who's ever tried to do this with Humis will tell you that it's not nearly as fun. Now that being said, no enemy is truly perfect, and the Tin Boys do have a few flaws. Although their tenaciousness is greatly appreciated.
But I also think another thing about the Tin Boys is they literally don't care about the orcs. They have no reason to do that shit. They're also not, like, passionate in battle.
Against them can start to feel kinda samey after a while. It all starts to get a little bit dull. Most of the Tin Boys are mindless automatons that fight in complete silence. No war
cringe, no screaming, bro!
Cries, no screams of pain, nothing to get the blood pumping. They just don't have the passion for fighting like orcs or even some Humis do. That being said, the Tinnies do have—
It's like, to put this in layman's terms, fighting humans is like having sex with a prostitute. Fighting Necrons is like having sex with a pillow. Yeah, like, you understand, there's just a level of passion it's just not the same.
Some pretty great tech to loot. Sure, their tanks might float around and their guns may not be very loud, but they're proper killy and can unleash some pretty hilariously devastating effects on
They have some pretty fucked up weapons.
Battlefield. The orcs will routinely do everything they can to try to loot them.
What is that image?
Only problem is, most of the time, when they get into a fight with them, after they finish giving them a good kicking and the Tins start to run for it, they and all of their equipment starts to fade out of existence, just completely disappearing and leaving no spoils for the boys.
Yep, that's the craziest shit. The Necrons, they're on a whole other level. I can't see them actually giving a shit about the orcs.
Which is real sore loser behavior.
True! Imagine leaving and taking your loot.
This isn't exactly widespread information, but there are some orcs that know the secret, that the best way to start looting tinny gear is not to fight them. It's to sneak into their tombs while they're all still asleep. This is what the orcs of Zork did a little while ago.
No shot.
Once they got inside, they proceeded to start looting like crazy.
Oh my
but
God.
Their rambunctious enthusiasm unfortunately ended up triggering the tomb's reanimation protocols, and the boys soon found themselves surrounded by thousands of canoptic constructs.
Yeah,
if far from being intimidated, the boys were absolutely delighted. They started scavenging.
Dude, this is the greatest thing in the world. It's like, dude, orcs would make the best recon people of all time. It's like they go in complete stealth. If they succeed, they end up looting the whole place. And if they fail and the alarm goes off and they get ambushed, then hell yeah! Time for a good fight!
Stealing like crazy, and ended up using all of the tin
Orcs and Admech bumped into each other stealing from the Necrons more than once. That's hilarious.
boy gear to cobble together hordes of cyborgs and morkanauts and ever more improbable super weapons,
Yeah.
while also hijacking some Dolem gates to ferry in wave upon wave of reinforcements. By the time the fighting was done and Overlord Thamtak the Magnificent awoke to take command of his legions, he opened his eyes to the sight of an entire mob of leering mech boys standing over his sarcophagus.
Oh, no.
Evil gleams in
No, dude, wakes up. I got all the boys looking at him. Oh my God, bro, there ain't no way. Oh my Lord.
their eyes and revving power tools in their hands.
They were gonna take him apart and shit. Oh my God, fuck, dude.
And speaking of valuable tech,
All right, the Tau. They have long-range guns, but I cannot imagine the orcs like fighting space communists.
and those who utilize it, the Tau, or the Fish Boys, have some of the fanciest tech worth looting. And their stuff is a bit easier to figure out than the Tin Boy machines. The orcs will routinely mock the Fish Boy weapons for not looking nor sounding like proper DACA.
They're like gay laser beams, okay? They're gazer beams.
But none will argue their effectiveness. This often makes them preferred raiding targets for the orcs from the Bad Moon clan. For example, there was a massive colony seeding ship originally known as the Hope's Light in their fishy language that was captured by Megaboss Mokrog and turned into his looted flagship,
Dude, fucking legends.
now appropriately renamed the Tau Killa.
Yeah! What was that? What did they call it? Blue pussy? What did they call their ship? Compare that to Tau Killer, bro.
The boss has now been using this to wage unending war on the Kalshan Sept for about 200 years.
Dude's living the best life. Dude, that's the crazy thing. The Tau, they don't want to deal with these guys. The Tau's philosophy, by the way, is growth through peace. They have some sort of galactic federation where they're trying to include more and more races and people into their like big space communism situation. And like they're like the, I guess they're the good guys if you want to be a pussy about it, but like they're trying their best to do that shit. And the orcs are just literally fucking with them because it's like, ooh, battles, and they're just, why?
So
Peace is join or be exterminated. Yeah, that's why I said good guys if you're a pussy about it. There are no good guys in Warhammer 40K.
yeah, they've got some pretty good stuff to loot. But when it comes to fighting against the Fish Boys, it's ultimately a pretty frustrating affair.
Yeah,
for
because they have like force fields and long range weapons and shit. Like, dude, that is not what a good orc wants to do.
the orcs. You see, the thing about Fish Boys is they really don't like it when you hit them in the teeth with
Yeah,
a
it's like proverbially, metaphorically, it's like having phone sex instead of like real sex with another human. I don't know why all these like why the sex analogies are happening. I think it's because of the guttural enjoyment of an orc thrusting his giant heavy meat onto another dude. Like, I mean, like by punching him.
choppa. So they'll do everything they can to put as much distance between themselves and the orcs as possible. This means that almost always, without fail, the boys will suffer unprecedented losses in the initial charge, and will almost never get the satisfaction of a good old-fashioned brawl with an enemy that actually hits you back when
It's crazy because when they're in long range, they're just losing all their people because the Tau has insane long range guns. So they're like super far away. They're losing all their guys as they get close. And then if they actually do succeed to get up close and personal, they can't even put up a fight and they just butcher them. It's like worst of both worlds, bro.
fighting against them. Now, you would think this would be something that would either cause them to change up their tactics or lose interest in fighting them. But it's not like that at all. They just accept that this is part of the territory with the fishies. Sure, it's a bit annoying, but the delay just makes it all the more satisfying when you do finally get your hands on the gits. Plus, the initial losses just mean that there'll be more Fish Boys to crump for all the boys that do survive the charge.
Oh my God, that's the worst fucking perspective of all time.
We started with 100 orcs and now we only have 50, which means each of us gets to kill double the amount of enemies.
Oh my God, dude, what is that?
They might
Oh my god, dude, you're just running up to them while they're sniping you off. That's just orc edging. It's just long distance warfare.
too much focus in their daka and negate the joy of variety in a fight. But at least the fishies seem enthusiastic and passionate about fighting in their own weird fishy way.
Yeah.
The scrawnies, on the other hand, well, let's get into it.
All right, that's the Eldar, right?
Scrawnies and spikies.
Yeah, so for those of you that need a bit of a lore drop, for those of you that need a bit of a lore intro, so 60 million years ago, all right, long before the Imperium of Man ever showed up, the old ones were fighting against the Necrons. The Necrons were kind of butchering the old ones, and the old ones, this ancient species that has already been wiped out, they created the Eldar, like these space wizard elves, and the orcs, or whatever, for like these massive burly war machines. So they actually used to be allies 60 million years ago, but the orcs don't remember that.
Also known as the Eldari and the Drukhari, are probably the most annoying of all enemies that the orcs routinely fight. Somehow, they manage to be even more cowardly
I fear no man, but that thing.
than humies, which in and of itself is at least impressive. For some reason that the orcs just can't wrap their heads around, the scrawny seem to be more afraid of dying than any other species in the entire galaxy.
Yeah, they can't fathom it, because most of them were genocided. There is literally only a tiny % of the population of Eldar still around since the Slenge happened.
Something about some pink god, it doesn't matter. They don't
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We don't need to focus about that.
pay too much attention to any gods that aren't Gork or Mork, as the rest of them are just a bunch of wimps not
Based!
worth thinking about.
My god is dope, your god is cringe.
Besides, every orc knows there's only two possible things that can happen when you die. Either nothing happens and then you're not bothered because there's nothing, or you go to the Great Green and meet Gork and Mork.
That is maybe the most based agnostic perspective of the afterlife I have ever heard in my entire life. And it came from the orcs. That might be the most based agnostic perspective of the afterlife ever. They're like, listen, I'm not dead, so I don't know what's gonna happen. All right, I don't know. If nothing happens, then who cares? Nothing to bother me. And if something happens,
We meet Gork and Mork!
dude, that's awesome.
Who then subsequently reincarnate you back into the body of a new orc, so you
Yeah.
can go back to fighting and do it all again. Death isn't something that the orcs are afraid of. I mean, it's something to be avoided if it can be helped, but being afraid of it just ain't logical.
Yeah, cringe, because why be afraid of death, bro? Either nothing happens or it's gonna be great.
Also, all of the scrawnies, be they pointy heads, clowns, or spikies, have this real undeserved arrogance about them that the orcs find off-putting.
They don't like the racism, bro.
It's like they approach the galaxy as though it should automatically behave the way they want it to.
Well, they did rule the galaxy for 60 million years until they got fucking nuked by a chaos god.
And then they get very miffed when it routinely doesn't. Just like how the humies do things the orcs find baffling, it's much the same way with the scrawnies, but somehow even worse. At the end of the day, for as cowardly, weak, and oftentimes stupid as humies is, they at least kinda sorta function in a vaguely similar manner to the orcs. They're just really bad at being orcs. But
Dude, it's crazy. Even orcs are fed up with the Eldar being arrogant pieces of shit. The orcs are fed up with them. True.
the scrawnies go one step further and do things that actively annoy them. They follow
Alright.
the same path as the tin boys and the fish heads, in that they make all of their trucks float around on grav lifts rather than
Cringe.
being set on good old wheels and tracks.
Cringe.
Also, if their guns do make any noise, it's all weird sounds that certainly aren't Daka. A proper gun should have enough recoil that it almost breaks your shoulder with every
I fucking love these guys.
If your car is not driving off the roads, you're a pussy. If your gun is not dislocating your shoulder, you're a cuck.
Oh my god. These guys are fucking awesome.
shot. But just like with other species, every orc that's ever fought against the scrawnies and lived long enough to have another go knows that looks can be deceiving. Just like their owners, scrawny guns are skinny, flimsy things that you could easily break over your knee without much effort,
True.
but they pack one hell of a punch. They may be weird and stupid looking, but at the end of the day, they're right killy. And from the orc's perspective, that's something you gotta respect. Now, that's mostly just in theory, because when the orcs do actually get to fight against the scrawnies, and this goes doubly for the spikies, it's almost never as fun as it should be. They almost exclusively fight with hit-and-run style tactics.
Literally, there is no honor in combat, and they actually value their remaining people. It's a really interesting perspective, because when you look at the humans are almost indisposable. I mean, are disposable from the perspective of the Imperium of Man, right? They have a trillion soldiers. Honestly, for the sake of the Imperium, the loot that the soldiers have are worth more than the lives of some of the regular guardsmen. So they will fight in the way that is most optimal for the survival of humanity. And if that includes taking 1 billion soldiers dying, then, well, you know what? It's optimal for humanity. We're still going to go ahead with that shit. That's the Imperium of Man's perspective. And the Eldar, since there are so few of them left, perspectively speaking, because so many of them, so many untold billions of them were literally consumed by Slaanesh when the Eye of Terror opened. Like, when all that shit happened, Slaanesh was born and nuked their entire species. At this point, survival is the #1 goal for these guys, and survival on an individual level, not survival on a species level. So, I find it really interesting that their battle and tactics definitely reflects this core ideological difference that they have with humans. That's just good lore writing, honestly.
Striking from the shadows and only getting stuck in a fight they're 100% sure them and their mates can win.
Absolute pussy behavior. But their goal is keeping every single one of them alive. Like, they can't even, what was it? Could they have children? Like, could they repopulate? I don't even know. So I feel like they feel like every loss is like a genuine, legitimate loss to their race.
Without getting hit.
No, right, they can't, because every time they die, they instantly get schlorped by Slaanesh. Good point, chat. True. They have to be incredibly super fucking careful, or they might just go extinct. So it is really interesting to see that their goals are so different than humans.
Back. Now sure, if a line of boys and a line of scrawnies all charged at each other, both sides knew there was only one possible outcome, and it would involve the scrawnies getting a good kicking.
Yeah.
But scrawnies didn't fight like orcs. They were always thinking about stuff.
Cringe!
And the spiky ones had this annoying habit of laying traps to draw a couple of mobs off at a time.
Wow! Cringe!
Pick them off one by one, which was just...
Oh, yeah, and if they pound a little too hard, they get sucked into Slaanesh. I feel like people that are watching this without knowing Warhammer lore are going to be so confused, but dude, Warhammer lore, I'm telling you, it's S tier, bro.
rude. They didn't even give the rest of the boys a chance to get in on the scrap.
Yeah, they didn't even tell them that they were booby-trapping it. That's pretty messed up.
Also, with the spikies in particular, they have this weird fascination with fighting things that can't or won't fight back. This behavior...
True, they torture people, the spikies, the Dark Eldar.
Here is anathema to the orcs.
They don't understand. I don't get it. Why would you torture someone that can't fight back? That's cringe.
It's the equivalent of shooting at rocks, which, sure enough, could be fun for at least a little while.
Yeah.
But the point of a fight was the fight, where your blood was pumping and Gork and Mork were roaring in your ears. It's not fun
Orcs are very anti-torture. They're very humanitarian.
unless the other git is looking to take your head off in return. Further, the spikies seem to take pleasure in not just killing and fighting, but actively hurting their enemies.
Yeah, they just can't fathom the torture type situation.
Even after the fight is done. Sometimes they would even try to capture their enemies, avoiding the fight altogether.
Yeah, no, so what's going on here is like these Dark Eldar, they'll capture humans and torture them and turn them into like living furniture and shit. Like, these are the most depraved creatures of all time.
Just so they could hurt them. Now, torture is something that orcs just can't wrap their heads around. Why would you waste time poking at your enemy like this when you could just move on to another one and keep fighting?
True!
No self-respecting orc would ever engage in torture, not even to their worst enemy. The very idea makes them sick.
Honestly, based.
Well, unless it was funny. Then they definitely would, and have many times in the past. But that's different.
Yeah, because humor is different. I agree. Being racist is cringe, but if you're like a comedian and you make a racist joke, then like we give you a pass, right? I feel like I could respect that.
So the scrawnies use tactics that aren't much fun to fight against, and since they're a dying species and all, there's not very many of them. Both things that don't rank highly when it comes to traits of a good enemy. So is there anything redeeming about them at all? Well, kind of, at least to some orcs. When it comes to looting, as I mentioned before, the orcs find the aesthetics of scrawny weaponry to be pretty off-putting, but they do respect its power. Likewise, they're fascinated by scrawny armor, as even though it's no thicker than an orc's finger, it's capable of stopping a bullet or a choppa just as well as a hunk of steel as big as an orc's fist. It's way too small for the orcs to wear though, and even if they could fit into it, they know they'd be the laughingstock of their mates. So if they do use it,
Dude, they just strap breastplates to their faces.
They have to bash it into the shape of something that's at least not completely humiliating.
Yeah!
The rest of the scrawny's gear, though, has a bunch of weird properties, like the ability to make portals or make things float that have no business floating. This loot is highly sought after by the mech boys, who will often pay a pretty hefty price in teeth for whatever boy manages to bring some in.
Dude, I love that teeth is their currency, bro.
So it at least has value in that aspect.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty much what I expected for the Eldar, to be honest. Like, it's just such a completely different philosophy that they have. Like, their goals are completely different. There's no way they could see eye to eye. Their battle tactics and everything just doesn't mesh at all.
Now, the Bug Eyes, also known as the Tyranids, are probably about as far from scrawnies as you can get. Not only
These
do they
guys are vicious, bloodthirsty monsters.
seem to love fighting, but there's an endless variety of different types of them. Not to mention the best part, there's a lot of them.
There's trillions of them filling surrounding galaxies. Like, dude, this is like a whole ass other level. Yeah, maybe they do like the Tyranids. I thought somehow they'd hate the Tyranids, but no, why would they hate the Tyranids? They'll give them the fight of their life. Oh, no loot. There's no loot. You can never loot Tyranids. They're biological weapons.
They reproduce just as quickly, if not even faster than the orcs
Which is pretty fucking scary.
do. So when the boys find a planet currently being overrun by Bug Eyes, they know they're going to have more entertainment than they know what to do with. There's just a couple of small issues when it comes to fighting them. First is that whereas the scrawnies think way too much, the Bug Eyes don't really think of much of anything at all. They're like big squigs in that regard to the orcs.
All right.
The only thing they're concerned with is getting their teeth into their next meal. Now sure, sometimes they may look organized and like they're working together, but remember, looks can be deceiving. All the boys gotta do is pop one of the big brain-looking Bug Eyes, and the rest of them go absolutely nuts.
Right? Because it's a hive mind. It's one giant super creature.
Which, in fairness, is always good for a laugh. The second issue that they have with them is that there's just not much they can loot from them.
Yeah, no loot. They're biological weapons.
All of the Bug Eye weaponry isn't much use to an orc. They're all fleshy, rotting organs and not proper DACA. Now that being said, their teeth, scything talons, and chitinous armor plating can be fashioned into some pretty good gear with a little orky ingenuity. But most orcs prefer metal equipment, something the Bug Eyes just can't offer them. Now, of course, fighting is what truly matters. No orc would argue against this, but looting is important too. If fighting was a cake, then looting would be the frosting. And everyone knows that cakes always taste better with frosting. Unless it's cheesecake, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Cheesecake is pretty goated.
I don't think there's a single orc out there that does.
Yeah, you finish the raid and there's nothing to loot. True. That's a big disadvantage. Big disadvantage for sure.
Doesn't like fighting against the Bug Eyes, but some orcs like it way more than all the rest. The Snakebites, for example, a more primitive orc clan that follows what they call the old ways, enjoys the
Dude, the old ways, bro. We already covered these guys. They don't believe in like the heavy machinery and shit. They're just like, big stick, go bonk.
thrill of the hunt and routinely targets Bug Eyes and other big beasties as their preferred enemy type.
Orc conservatives, boomer orcs.
There's actually one tribe of snakebite orcs in particular, known as the Worm Killers, that have taken this to an entirely different level. You see, at one
They industrialized genocide, ladies and gentlemen.
point, this clan was fighting against the Bug Eyes in some jungle on a backwater world where they discovered a big fleshy Bug Eye spore. They brought it back to their fleet and cracked it open, and out came hundreds of tiny baby Bug Eyes that quickly ran off in every direction. They would soon find that these creatures grew really quickly, and they were delighted to find their cruiser in a very short period completely overrun with them. No sooner
They were delighted to find that they were overrun by giant insectoid monsters.
had they bashed one in that another would appear out of a vent or a drain.
Dude, this is like walking around in Manhattan at midnight with cockroaches running all over the place.
Now eventually, the cruiser was completely infested and became the mirror image of the Tyranid-infested jungle from before. The only orcs that ended up surviving were these snakebites, who had become absolute experts in hunting these beasties. Eventually, they managed to kill all of them, and when they met up with a bunch of other orcs, they were absolutely covered from head to toe in Tyranid trophies, and had taken on the name Worm Killers. This experience had been so much fun for them that they decided to...
That is insane. Oh my god. They literally breed creatures to have fun murdering them. That has got to be the most wild perspective I've ever seen.
Hunt down more of those spore pods, which they would then subsequently bring to new worlds, pop them open on their surface, and then leave for a few years, only to return to a planet completely overrun by Bug Eyes.
That is the most insane shit ever. They will literally create an ecosystem of things trying to kill them for the fun of the hunt. Oh my god.
It was perfect.
The Tyranids evolved in part specifically to stave off those exact orcs? That's amazing. Dude, it's an orc park, okay? It's like the Safari Zone, but for orcs.
Not only were all of the humies that lived on these worlds super mad.
Bro, no way! It was like a prank. They would capture this Tyranid pod, and they would bring it to a human world to have it hatch there and overrun the planet, just for extreme chaos. Get pranked, bro.
Which the worm killers found
This is insane. This is insane.
really funny. But now they had a whole new planet of bug eyes to smash.
Yeah.
Although exact numbers can't be confirmed, it's estimated that the worm killers have unleashed a bug eye Armageddon on dozens of worlds.
That's fucking crazy. That's insane. Like, dude, this is like insane levels of trolling. This is like an abnormal, insane level of trolling. I've never seen something like this. Have you ever heard of like a character or a plot point like this? You have humans actually like in fear for their life because orcs want to hunt bug guys, so they plant bug eye swarms on human planets and they need to deal with that shit. Bro, it's like, dude, the orcs are so much more than just an annoyance for the humans. They don't even have like a diametrically opposed philosophy, but they are such a nightmare.
Ensuring that
It's like biological warfare for entertainment.
they're never far away from a good fight.
Bro, that's awful. Oh,
Now, the beakies
All right,
are-
I was wondering why we skipped Space Marines.
Probably the most classic and iconic of all of the orcs' enemies, and it's a huge reason why they enjoy fighting against the humies so much. Pretty much every major weakness that the humies have when it comes to being a proper enemy,
Yeah, because they're too fleshy and...
the beakies have fixed. Humans by tradition are soft and cowardly, but beakies are proper hard. In their armor, they're about on par with an orc in terms of size, durability, and strength. And maybe not a war boss or a knob, but at least you're
Look at the size of that motherfucker.
run-of-the-mill boy. They're also far more aggressive than regular humies, and are not prone to streaks of cowardice.
Yeah, they're not pussies. No, these are goated humies.
Honestly, the way the orcs see them, the beakies are more like them than any other living creature in the entire galaxy. They're like...
It's just the irony though is the fact that their philosophies are polar opposites. Polar opposites. But from their perspective, it doesn't matter because the battle will happen.
kindred spirits, so to speak. The beakies understand that a fight is something you run towards and not away from. They're tough, strong, fast, and they'll keep fighting even after they've taken a good kicking. Not to mention, they've got good taste in both armor and daka. Their bolters are good and loud, just like the orcs' guns.
Yeah, baby! Dude, they're bolters, just in case you were curious.
Good
Alright?
taste in both armor and daka. Their bolters are
This is a gun that shoots torpedoes like they're machine gun bullets. Like, imagine that, bro.
good and loud, just like the orcs' guns, and their armor is much more well made than all of that other humie stuff.
Yeah, great loot.
Making it some of the orcs' favorite equipment to loot. Now, it should come as no surprise that the orcs have a lot of respect for them, but
Damn.
they're not perfect. First and foremost, there's not nearly enough of them.
Damn. Yeah, you listen. You're the Emperor agrees.
Somehow, they might even be rarer than the scrawny. And much to the orcs' disappointment, most of the time when they go to fight the humies, there isn't even a single beaky to bash. Second, like I mentioned earlier in the video, the orcs don't really understand the concept of hate. Anything they find annoying, they'll just fight. But the beaky...
Or just not fight. Like, if it's an annoying fight, they might just not fight them because why fight them? Like, it's such an interesting, like, philosophical opposition because the humans, they're fighting to survive. They're fighting orcs because if you don't fight the orcs, humanity will fall. And the orcs are fighting the humans because fuck yeah, good fight.
Beakies, on the other hand, seem to be entirely consumed by hatred for anything and everyone that isn't a humie.
Yeah, dude, the orcs are less bigoted than the humans. The orcs, they just want to fight everyone. They want a good time. The humans, filthy Xenos, brother, get the flamer.
Hatred drips out of every one of their pores and motivates every action they take,
And it's crazy, and they can't even understand that. They literally cannot understand why they hate them.
and every decision they make. Now, sure, them being so hateful made them a bit more fun to fight, but some of the more thinky orcs actually kinda pity them in a way, which is
Damn.
another emotion the orcs aren't used to dealing with and they find it annoying.
Yeah, they pity them, bro. Like, why are they mad, bro? Why are they so mad? Have a good time. Put a smile on your face. We're going to battle.
You see, beakies are so consumed by hatred and an underlying bitterness that they're robbed of the joy they should be experiencing in a fight.
Bruh.
It's like, dude, why are you so angry? we are actively engaged in the most fun thing you could possibly do, fighting. But
Dude, they're pitied by an orc.
the orcs to think that you need to take a chill pill is at least some kind of accomplishment.
All right. Ooh, lads with the spikes.
Now, whereas the orcs don't really think much about the different chapters of Space Marines outside of the different color that they paint their armor, they do at least recognize that there's at least 2 different types of beakies, because the Chaos lads with the spikes have a completely different group of mates they pal around with.
All right.
Now, all beakies are proper hard, don't get it twisted,
Yeah.
but the Chaos beakies bring a lot more variety to the table when getting stuck in. Whether they be the blue weird boy beakies that cast all kinds of weird unnatural powers.
They're the goats, by the way. I love them. They're the Sons of the Emperor, right? Magnus's group. They're my favorite Chaos Space Marines.
The smelly green beakies that know how to take a punch.
Yeah, that's Asmongold's favorite. It's the Nurgle ones.
The strange pink beakies that, if I'm just being
Guys, fuck these guys. Fuck the Thousand Sons. Yeah, no, I meant the Thousand Sons. These are the Emperor's children. Dude, these guys, these are the Griffith ones. God!
honest, the orcs find pretty weird.
Based orcs, get out of here.
Or their favorite, the red beakies that seem to love fighting.
Yes! They work with Angron or corn people.
Almost as much as the orcs do. The major issue with them, though, is that the Chaos lads with the spikes do a lot of weird stuff. Not only that, they often seem to have an agenda other than just fighting.
Yeah, it's crazy. The world enders. True. Yeah. Bro, dude, it's like, why do you have an agenda? Just fight, dude. Just literally battle me. Like, fight. What do you mean agenda? Human sacrifice? Why would you do that?
In a lot of ways, they're more like regular humies in that aspect and less like true beakies, at least as far as the orcs are concerned. When it comes to the Chaos gods themselves, they're not really worth thinking about. Even though Khorne is absolutely obsessed with the orcs, he finds them deeply fascinating and entertaining.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
No proper orc would ever for a moment consider worshipping a puny Humi god. We're the only true gods any orc would ever associate. Now, all that being said, in their defense, the Chaos boys are probably the kings of variety when it comes to fighting. You never really know what to expect with them, and thus their fights never get dull. When dealing with the warp and all of the strange, unnatural things that come out of it, things routinely get pretty weird to say the least. Especially when you're dealing with the Chaos Griblies, or the demons as the Humies call them. They can show up seemingly out of thin air when
and they have insane random abilities and strength.
you're stuck in a fight with the Chaos lads, or even when you're out in the warp minding your own business. The orcs view the demonic incursions of Griblies onto their ships as a good bit of sport. A fun
Bro, dude, demons invade their ship and they're like, woohoo, yeah, baby.
way to pass
It was gonna be a boring Saturday, but not anymore.
the time on long journeys. And sure, Griblies are fun enough to fight, certainly is a nice change of pace between mutinies, but no matter how brutal and vicious they are, they're ultimately just not that satisfying
Yeah.
to kill. When the orcs crump them, they just dematerialize,
Cringe.
disappearing as if they were made of smoke.
Cringe.
Every orc knows that the best part of the fight is when you lop off the enemy git's head and all the blood goes gushing out.
True.
They never get that satisfying payoff with the Griblies, which ultimately just leaves them pretty pent up and frustrated.
Hey.
So most of the time, after they fight them, they just go back to fighting themselves.
The demons show up, they're all just like, ooh. They all fight the demons and the demons disappear and they're like, oh, okay. And then they just fight each other instead.
So the Chaos lads with the spikes have their place in the hierarchy of enemies, just like the Griblies and the rest of the species within the Milky Way. Unfortunately though, there are some enemies that we know the orcs get stuck in with pretty frequently that have yet to be written about from their perspective,
Ooh.
so we can only really speculate on how they feel about them. Now hopefully when Games Workshop decides to flesh out the Leagues of Votan, or the Stunties as they used to be called in old lore by the orcs, we'll also get a few stories from the orcs' perspective
Yeah.
to see what they think about them.
Dude, this was
Likewise,
great.
the Custodians, who we can assume
There's no way. Did the Custodians ever fight orcs? Because the Custodians, they're all on Holy Terra. I don't think orcs ever made it into Holy Terra.
they would love because they're like bigger, harder beakies with
Yeah.
way better gear to loot, would be right at the top of the list for the
I doubt they've ever met them.
orcs' preferred enemies. But as of the time of this recording, we haven't gotten a book that lets us see inside of their head while they're fighting against them.
Have orcs ever fought Oh, maybe they fought Oh, they did. Maybe they fought Custodes before the Horus Heresy. Orcs did make it to Terra, but only once. Damn, I didn't know that. Dude, that must be crazy. Orcs almost took over Terra. Holy shit.
Which is a real shame, and it's something I hope they correct in the future. But after all this, what do you guys think?
Oh, women in Warhammer 40K. Wow, it's so woke, guys.
Who do you think would be the orcs' favorite enemy and why? Now personally, I'm leaning towards regular old humies, as they've got the most history with them outside of the Necrons and the Eldar, but none of the boys today remember the war in heaven, and they don't keep written records. So from the modern orcs perspective, humies, or more specifically the beakies,
Yeah, I think for sure the Space Marines
are the ones that check off the most boxes.
like they're right up their alley. Like their goal is eliminating the orcs, and their goal is eliminating the humans. I really feel like that's like the ultimate fucking battle for them. I feel like it's even better than the Chaos Space Marines, because when it comes to the Chaos Space Marines, they always have some sort of ulterior motive. They're trying to corrupt the world and shit like that. And they don't want to deal with any of that. They want someone who's completely focused and motivated on murdering them, so they can be completely focused on murdering them back. It's a simplistic lifestyle, but sometimes you just gotta put a smile on your face.
When it comes to traits a good enemy should have. If you like this video and you want to see more
Oh,
content,
that's right. Didn't the Emperor fight an orc? I do remember this lore drop. The Emperor fought one of those giant orcs in one-on-one combat, and he let, I think, was it Horus, actually be the one to kill him or something? Like, that did happen.
like it, do me a favor and hit the like button, leave a comment, and maybe subscribe to the channel if you have.
Yeah, that was, Wes Hammer makes great videos. You should check out his stuff. I love his lore dives. But anyway, this has been the Orc deep dive that I promised all of you. Every single faction from the perspective of the orcs. It was a banger. Again, subscribe, leave a like for more Warhammer lore dives. I do plan on keep lore diving into the Warhammer universe, because again, I love this shit. And you bet your ass I am going to be locked in for the TV show whenever that happens. Thank you all so much for being here, and remember to stay weird, fam. Like, subscribe, and this video was streamed live on kick.com/Nuxanor. See you there. Stay weird, fam.